of demon or alien, well, those are the exact type of creatures that would be able to speak on something like the subject of reality. So, in summary, we have ourselves Satan, or some alien, but probably Satan, disguising himself as a human to shape the world's religions. He's spreading fear via the newest and hottest technology of the 80s, television, and also spreading words about the true nature of reality in order to crush the lies of anyone he tells. Meanwhile, we have another intruder, which may or may not be the same character, using the spectrum of television to enter homes and steal away thousands of children. Talk about your feel-good horror stories for the holiday season. And I'm not even done. There's still a lot more to this story in the form of alternates, unstoppable mutant doppelgangers, as well as a mysterious society that's trying to piece things all back together with the help of a dead man. And here's the twist, friends. This guy may not be as evil as he first appears. But all that and more on the next installment, because let me tell you, there's a lot to cover here. So, in the meantime, you want to learn a mind-bending metaphysical truth about the world that won't?
You've returned to Mandela County. Foolish. Nobody will find you. Nobody knows you are here. Nobody knows.
Do you understand? Do you understand? Understand? Do you understand?
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, where we understand, or at least we try to. And today, what we're trying to understand are the supernatural mysteries happening over in Mandela County, where children are going missing, humans are being replaced with doppelgangers, and a mysterious face keeps appearing on late-night TV. Oh, it's so awful. Much better. Now, if you haven't seen our previous theory on the Mandela Catalog, an analog horror series here on YouTube, then I highly recommend that you start over there because this series is dense. Link is down in the description, or provided YouTube isn't stroking out, it should be over in that recommended feed next to the video. The overall gist is that the fictional Mandela County has been the epicenter of a rash of horrific and seemingly paranormal crimes over the past few decades. First and foremost, over 3,400 children have gone missing. Seemingly unrelated to that, a strange species of creature known as alternates have invaded with the ability to mimic humans. These things come in 3 different flavors. Type 1 alternates look like normal people and seem to have the ability to blend into regular society. Type 2 alternates have unrealistic proportions like long arms and stretched out faces, making them a lot more obvious to see, but also a lot more frightening. And Type 3 alternates are described as having biologically impossible characteristics, depicted by an upside-down figure. To my knowledge, we haven't seen any of these yet. At most, they've been censored, but honestly, I don't think I want to know what they actually look like. Regardless of the type, we've seen that alternates can be incredibly dangerous. They phase into reality, tell you something, and that little chat tends to infect the victim with MAD, short for metaphysical awareness disorder, at which point you have like a 97% chance of self-destruction. It's not like they suddenly turn you into an electrode. I mean, death by your own hand, if you catch my brand-friendly drift. And if all of that wasn't enough, there's also a creepy face called the Intruder, who enters houses late at night through any TV screens people might have hanging around. So really, Mandela County, just worst place to live. And that's largely where we left off last time. But at the top of this year, the Mandela Catalog Volume 2 dropped. A 20-minute upload that gives us a ton of world building and a whole lot more to speculate about. Finding places for some puzzle pieces while putting more on the table. This time we're taking all the way back to the ancient and spooky year of 2009. Oh, I'm starting to have flashbacks to that time that I watched G.I. Joe Rise of the Cobra and—
I'm gonna let you finish.
But X-Men Origins Wolverine was the worst movie of 2009.
And oh yeah, Kanye was shamelessly interrupting people. A terrifying year indeed. Volume 2 follows Adam Murray and Jonah Marshall, 2 members of the Bythorn Paranormal Society. It's worth noting that Bythorn was actually called out as one of the counties affected by child disappearances mentioned back in Season 1, and that being associated with the society is why these 2 are apparently wanted criminals. The 2 are contacted by a woman hoping the duo can investigate her house for spiritual evidence of a dead cat, which supposedly keeps her up with its haunting meowing at night. She specifically mentions that she doesn't think it's an alternate.
Really? A freaking cat alternate? Shh.
I don't think it's an alternate.
They accept the job, and on their way over, we get some interesting world building. The fact that here in 2009, the existence of alternates is well known, but also hotly debated.
Half of me thinks that there aren't even alternates.
It's also clear that at this point in history, everyone knows about the existence of the Intruder and have taken steps to try and prevent his invasion, with stuff like TV screens removed from all households.
They didn't have to outlook these things, did they? Like, I doubt that guy's face could appear on something like this and, you know, kill you.
When they arrive at the house, unsurprisingly, some weird things start to happen. Curtains get moved, cameras go down, radios start malfunctioning.
Oh my god, behind you!
Dude, seriously, stop.
Behind you! Behind you!
Adam is approached by an alternate and gets this truth bomb dropped on him. Yo, Type 2 alternate be spitting some mad facts here. Okay, in all seriousness, you didn't miss anything. That was all gibberish. But it doesn't mean that that interaction wasn't important. What we just witnessed is them trying to infect Adam with MAD. I'm guessing that what was whispered here was some metaphysical truth about humanity's place in the universe, something that tends to make people lose their minds and end their lives. However, Adam is okay. He's still alive. Why? Well, as we learn about MAD in an earlier upload, people only lose it when they don't want to know the information.
MAD is a result of exposure to verbal information that is not desired to be known.
The subtitles even seem to allude to this in the immediate aftermath of Adam's encounter, saying, quote, "It's not difficult to avoid. The patient must try to actively seek it out." This is also probably why Adam's been immune to the encounters he's had with alternates up to this point in his life. He wants the information. He's not scared by it.
These things have taken so much away from us, yet you still run to them every chance you get. You're not invincible. Okay, I know you thought that when we started doing these death marches, and nothing happened, and I get it, but this right here is real.
Eventually, Adam makes his way down to the basement. On the wall are the words, "Nothing is worth the risk." This message is the same one that we saw given to emergency responders when they were told not to reveal their fears over the phone back in season 1.
Nothing is worth the risk, nothing is worth the risk, nothing is worth the risk.
Again, we get this repeated theme of fear being the thing that puts you at risk, but Adam, by showing that he's not afraid, seems to be able to survive these encounters. He also finds a 4x3 television set. Notable because in our timeline, those things were long out of style in 2009. This indicates that the TV has been kept here for a long time since the anti-intruder screen purge. Remember, in this universe, TVs are no longer a thing that are supposed to exist. On the TV is an image of a cat. The cat's meowing is replaced briefly by a music box-style recording of Somewhere Over the Rainbow before the now familiar image of the intruder appears, front and center. When Adam asks the intruder what he is, the screen flashes to a series of images from season 1, including the Department of Temporal Phenomena splash screen, as well as images of Mark Heathcliff, a victim of the alternates back in 1992. When an otherworldly voice asks, "What have you done?" Adam responds,
I did the right thing.
Nobody is coming to help you.
Again, he's confident and unafraid of his actions. You'll notice that Adam's answer is immediately followed by a female voice. One that, if I were to guess, is Adam's lost female friend, sister, whatever it was he was looking for as hinted at earlier in the video.
I wish we'd never looked for your because she is dead and gone, and we were never gonna get her back.
Meanwhile, Adam's friend Jonah drives away in terror, all while his GPS chides him in the voice used by the false angel from the season 1 upload Overthrown. Which makes it a good time to talk about the character names. This series is very clearly connected to biblical stories. There have been hidden Bible verses in the closed captions, there's been talk of angels and false shepherds. Even the first image of the series is a corrupted clip from a video series called The Beginner's Bible. And here, we're watching the fallout of two biblically named characters, Jonah and Adam. Jonah, as most people vaguely know, is the guy that got swallowed by a fish in the Bible. What people might not know about that story is the reason he became fish food. You see, God sent Jonah to go tell a city that they were about to get wrecked unless they changed their sinful ways. Jonah chickens out and runs away, ultimately leaving the city to die. While on a boat trying to escape from the presence of the Lord, the sea gets real rough and won't calm down until Jonah is yeeted off the side and into the water. Gulp. Fish food. Now, what do we have here in the Mandela catalog? Jonah refusing to stick with Adam, running away from the scene, and leaving his friend to die. And of course, there's Adam, first man, the one created by God in his likeness and who eats the apple of enlightenment, only to himself get yeeted out of the Garden of Eden. In fact, we explicitly see that exact scene from the Bible in this upload of the Mandela catalog.
God's probably not even looking. Oh, go ahead.
Suddenly, I feel kind of scared.
Even though Adam ends this upload talking to the intruder, something tells me that we haven't seen the last of him. While we couldn't understand what gibberish the alternate was saying to him earlier, we do have this other conversation which begins to reveal a lot about the world.
Follow the shepherd and you will have peace. Follow my voice instead and you will find great happiness. Wake up, Adam. Do not make me wake the others.
This conversation seems extremely important for several reasons. First, it immediately shows us that this is a world that has two rival factions going head to head against each other. The Shepherd and whoever is speaking to us here. My guess is that it's the Intruder, the guy ultimately on the TV screens. So it's a battle between the false Shepherd and his army of alternates, I'm guessing that's who we see in the first upload of the series, versus the Intruder, who's kidnapping kids through their TV screens. You are either following one or the other. Great, really good options there, friends. So, which is right? Well, in order to understand that, we have to talk a bit more about Adam and the Intruder. You see, I think the Intruder might not be working against us in the long term. While the Intruder does seem to be making children disappear, I suspect that he might be doing this to save the future of humanity. Future being the key word here. I want to focus on a detail that I've largely ignored thus far. The Department of Temporal Phenomena. We first see their logo at the very start of Volume 1, so you know this one's gotta be important. But with a name like Temporal Phenomena, it seems to imply that there's some kind of time travel at play. So why would a time travel department be handling the disappearance of children and the appearance of doppelganger alternates? Well, I believe the Intruder knows who's gonna become alternates in the future, and he's trying to stop them before they become part of the unholy army that ends the world. Consider this, we know that this is a story full of biblical allusions, and in the canon of the Catholic Church, anyone who ends their own life winds up in Satan's army, considering taking a life is a sin, and if you take your own life, there's no time for you to repent and be forgiven. This then leads me to believe that the alternates are working directly for the false shepherd, Satan. Notice that alternates don't kill you. They trick you into doing it yourself by giving you unwanted information and turning you mad. But by heading them off at the pass, the Intruder is able to thin their numbers. In the video Volume 1, we follow the journey of Mark Heathcliff, a young man who, after trying to help his friend, is followed home by an alternate that keeps him trapped in his room. After a few days of being a prisoner, Mark ultimately winds up dead by his own hand. The false shepherd wins. However, the video also rewinds back to earlier in Mark's life, where we learn that he's been visited by the Intruder since his childhood. The Intruder also flashes images of Mark and his sister in front of the church when Adam asks who he is, which indicates that the Intruder knew Mark and his sister when they were kids. Let's look back to what's said about Adam in this video. Wake up. It's almost like the Intruder is taking kids and planting ideas in their heads so they're protected and unafraid of the alternates. Then, when the time comes, like sleeper agents, they're activated. That's why Adam's been so inexplicably obsessed with alternates. It's why he's been able to stay safe from their attacks. It's also, if I were to guess, what happened to his sister, friend, whatever, the girl that he's looking for. And that's why he's being told to wake up now. The Intruder is asking, do you understand? In other words, do you understand that you're now being called into service? And what's more, if Adam can't do the job, there are others waiting to be awoken. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that the Intruder is the good guy. He still seems to be taking children away from their parents. But regardless, I do think that the Intruder is specifically working against the alternates, trying to starve them by culling their food source. By doing something unspeakably evil, he's doing his best to prevent a global catastrophe that happens in the future. So there you have it, the uplifting tale of the Mandela Catalog, a story of religion, time travel, and old Sony cameras. Like I said, I get the sense that we haven't seen the last of Adam in this story, but we can all take away this lesson. The next time a creepy Edvard... Thanks to the Google Pixel 7 Pro for sponsoring this video.
Who is it? Who's there?
Boxes that you had to cart. The show that definitely isn't standing right behind you. If you've spent any time watching the channel recently, you know that we are in love with the world of analog horror. There are countless incredible independent filmmakers here on YouTube telling some of the most compelling and scariest stories in modern entertainment right now. I'm talking stuff like the Walton Files, the Backrooms, the Mandela Catalog, stories that all have an iconic look and feel because they're largely set in the 80s, 90s, and early aughts. This was a time when video tech was first becoming widely available and finding its footing. Camcorders were giant boxes that you had to cart around with you. And if you actually wanted to film something, well, you also had to bring along a library's worth of physical tapes to record on. No exaggeration, my family had a literal cooler-sized bag just to carry everything we needed to film like 30 minutes of the family Christmas. And even then, the footage we got was rough. When something moved, the footage got blurry. When it was dark, it got grainy. Most of the time, you just left what you shot on the recording tapes because transferring it to an actual VHS tape you could play required a master's degree in arranging wires and cables from the camcorder to the VCR VCR. And then once you actually watched what you made, your mileage varied. I'm guessing no one watching right now has ever even heard of a tracking button on a remote control before, right? That ringing bells for anyone? Well, you know those blurry lines that go across the screen in pretty much all analog horror uploads? Those were most often caused by a misalignment of the tape inside the VHS and the playback head inside the VCR. And tracking was the button that you used to help sync those two things up. This is the awkward puberty era of tech that I'm talking about. And that's what I love about these analog horror series. They're videos that take the early limitations of tech from the era and use them to create genuine, authentic, memorable scares. Now, at the top of the episode, you heard that this video is being sponsored by the Google Pixel 7 Pro. In fact, that whole opening was filmed on the phone's camera, a camera that just has a ton of amazing features. We had to work really hard to make the footage from this thing look old and scary like analog horror. Just take a look at this. This is the final shot, but watch as we remove one filter, two, get rid of the vignette, and a final effect, boom! This is the original footage that we were working with, and it looks fantastic, which got me thinking, what would modern a problem? This itty-bitty piece of tech now has a 5x zoom telephoto lens. Other has access to a high-quality camera. Lots look better because the camera is lower. Could an analog horror series take place in the modern day when everyone and their grandmother has access to a high-quality camera sitting in their pocket? Today we're looking at the tropes of analog horror to see what the equivalent would be if it was themed around today. In 20 to 30 years, when people look back at this era of entertainment, what will the retro tech horror stories look and feel like? Curl up and hide under the blankets, loyal theorists. We're about to find out. So before we can really jump into the idea of modern tech being too good to make analog horror, we should first take a step back to fully understand what makes the 80s and 90s tech so perfect for this type of storytelling. Like I mentioned in the intro, series like The Walton Files, Backrooms, Mandela Catalog, all of them are made to look like they were filmed on ancient camcorders. They have that iconic, jittery, blurry VHS look. This sort of technology became cheap enough to mass produce by the 1980s and were fairly common by the 1990s. That's why so many of these series take place in this era of content. It's also where we get the analog part of the label analog horror. These old camcorders used analog signals to write information onto actual magnetic strips. An analog signal is basically some sort of thing that constantly changes to represent different data points. This could be the heights or frequencies of wavelengths, like with radio signals, or even stuff that's simple, like a record where it reads the heights of grooves on the record and then translates that into an audio output. Because analog recordings are literal waves, there's an infinite amount of detail that you can get in there, but it also makes it more likely to have interference, like you see with television static. Hence why old TVs had antennas that you could use to fine-tune the signal. By contrast, digital signals are discrete packages that are stored as units of ones and zeros. A digital recording takes snapshots of the analog signal at a certain rate. The higher the rate, the closer to the original signal you're gonna get. Instead of encoding information onto a physical tape like with analog, digital signals store it onto memory cards. Anyway, at that time, analog tapes had the potential to be decent quality, and it turns out that the tech wasn't exactly the ideal solution for long-term storage. See, magnetic tape begins to degrade after 10 to 20 years if it isn't stored properly, meaning the footage gets blurry, it gets glitchy, corrupted. Here's a friendly reminder to convert all your old home videos into digital if you haven't already here, folks. What's more, the footage from these old cameras and camcorders was often interlaced. Have you ever paused an old video and noticed that any motion blur seems to have this weird series of horizontal lines running through it? That means that the footage was interlaced. Each single frame of the video only had about half the information needed for the full image. The rest of the image used the previous frame, meaning that any motion would be slightly offset and thus the horizontal lines. This drastically cut the amount of data needed for the full video, making it easier to both store and broadcast, but it also resulted in huge losses in quality. The opposite of this is known as progressive scan, where an entire image's worth of video is shown in each individual frame. You ever notice when you select the quality of a YouTube video, it says something like 1080p? Well, the P stands for progressive scan, and almost all video shot today uses that as the standard. Regardless, the lower quality interlaced video being played on a big old CRT screen helped to create the iconic flickering look that we now associate with old videos from this era. And you see, that's why it works so well for horror made on a budget. Not only is this sort of technology really cheap nowadays, but the look is easy to recreate in post-production using modern editing software. Like here, bam! Our editors just threw a bunch of effects on this to make it look like an old VHS, and it's what, like 2 layers in After Effects? This lets young filmmakers create something that's immediately stylish, atmospheric, set in a clear time and place in history. What's more important, though, though, is that they're also able to use this aesthetic to amplify what makes the series scary. This look creates an intentional lack of clarity. See, when you introduce a scary idea but you don't show that scary thing, what your audience imagines in their head is far more horrifying than anything you could possibly come up with yourself. It doesn't matter what medium you're in. The ideas used to great effect in the Cthulhu Mythos books, and a ton of the most iconic horror movies of all time have embraced this exact idea. Is your mechanical shark animatronic not working? Don't worry, just don't show the shark for the majority of the movie, and it's gonna wind up being way more effective and way scarier. And it's this lack of clarity that really intensifies the actual horror that analog horror is based on, that what's familiar can be deadly. Look at the three series that I keep using as examples. Mandela Catalog is all about our friends and neighbors being imposters. The Walton Files is about a family-friendly burger restaurant that turns deadly. And The Backrooms is about the horror of mundane balls and fluorescent lights. These aren't supernatural creatures, these are series that rely on the normal people and places around us made unnatural and scary. This idea that the familiar can hurt you is probably best exemplified by another trend that came out of this era, stranger danger. Though the term dates back all the way to the 1960s, it didn't catch fire until 1979, when a child in Manhattan was tragically kidnapped while walking to school. News media grabbed hold of the story, who spread it nationwide, and soon began widely reporting similar cases of missing kids. This culminated in 1982, when it was widely reported that nearly 50,000 American children were being kidnapped by strangers every year. And just so we're crystal clear on this, that number is wildly inflated. But it managed to cement the idea that all strangers could be potentially dangerous in the minds of the nation. And there were PSAs and school assemblies drilling that idea into people throughout the 80s and 90s, even up through the mid-2000s. But these analog horror series also play off another innate human fear, the uncanny valley. This is a phenomenon that many psychologists have noticed, where people have strong negative reactions to things that look almost human but aren't quite all the way there. Insert any low-budget, poorly executed CGI here. But again, this is where analog horror shines. Without the budget to pay for pristine, photorealistic, computer-generated worlds, these stories lean into the unsettling nature of things that are slightly off from reality. The alternates from Mandela Catalog are stretched, deformed human monsters. They're almost human, but not quite. The animatronics of Walton's restaurants exhibit jerky movements and speak in dead, emotionless, pre-recorded phrases. The Backrooms takes a generic office layout, but then twists it into something that's not built by human hands. Something that on the surface looks familiar, but where the nuances don't match up. The layout doesn't quite work with what those spaces would actually look and feel like if it was actually made by humans. Things are just slightly off, which keeps us off balance and nervous. But having laid all of that out, you can start to see the problem here, right? Modern technology just isn't super compatible with that flavor of classic analog horror. Our cameras are too good, and there's just a lot of them everywhere. And even if you are working with older, blurry footage today, there are upscaling programs that are able to use complex algorithms to increase the quality of footage near flawlessly. So if we were to sit here and think about what modern analog horror would be, what would it look like? If current analog horror thrives on the limitations of the technology from the past, what will the creators of the future be exploiting to scare us with stories about today? Since clarity of image isn't an issue anymore, we'd need to find something about contemporary technology that is scary. Honestly, I had to really think about this one. I mean, there are some obvious answers like social media, and that everyone shares a ton of information about themselves online, and not everyone is what they seem, but that's not super unique. Those stories are already being told by Hollywood. We all understand the scare potential there. It's also not a true parallel to analog horror. Again, the genre is about the limitations of filming equipment. Equipment that today seems to have no limitation. And therein lies the answer, I think. That right there is the point. Not that the video gets blurry in the dark, or that a shaky camera obscures the movement of a monster as it comes toward you. In an ironic twist, where analog horror as we know it's rooted in the limitations of technology from the 80s and 90s, I expect creators of analog horror in the future to lean into the idea that technology became too good in the 2020s. That what we define as photorealism has actually evolved beyond reality, now able to create realities that never even existed in the first place. What made me think of this was actually the Pixel 7. There's this feature in the camera called Magic Eraser, which lets you go into your photos after you take them to remove small objects in the background. It does this using AI, filling in the space left by the object with information about the space around it. It is, without exaggeration, an incredible tool. It helps you to create the perfect moment even if you weren't able to capture it at the time. I cannot tell you the amount of times that Steph and I have woken up at 4 a.m. just to get a picture in front of some landmark without hordes of people lingering in the background. Magic Eraser solves that problem instantly, getting me extra sleep while we're on vacation, which I am so thankful for. before. But Magic Eraser also shows how instantaneous this sort of tech is getting. Literally, you rub your finger and stuff in the background disappears. It erases people out of a moment in time. It is literally creating a new reality with just the touch of a finger. And sure, this sort of stuff has always been possible to some extent thanks to photo editing software, but the ease and speed at which it's possible now with the Magic Eraser is incredible. And we're not just talking about correcting photos either. I'm sure you've seen the news about AI with the ability to create artwork from using just a few keywords. My friends over at Corridor Digital have been experimenting with this sort of content creation for a while now. And let me tell you, AI image generation is even getting to a point where you feed it a bunch of pictures of an individual person and you can get it to spit out high-quality artistic interpretations of that person in almost any style you want. No joke, companies are already starting to talk to me about how this sort of technological advancement could be used to automatically generate video thumbnails in the near future. And it's not just stopping at still images either. We've already done 2 episodes dedicated to the ways that Hollywood has taken people's likenesses and putting them onto other bodies. How we're now able to synthesize voices from audio clips, things like that. There are even computer programs that allow you to take the voices of real people and convert them into AI voices, so you can then get those voices to say anything you want. And again, people are contacting me about this exact sort of thing, so that my auto-generated voice can exist forever reading these scripts as the eternal online theorist. And this is no longer a cumbersome process either. It's getting to the point where you can literally deepfake someone in real time on video calls. I mean, can you imagine how frightening it would be if these technologies combined and you could speak with someone's actual voice and face? That's not only terrifying, it's also incredibly believable in the near future. And if I were to make any sort of modern analog horror set in the present day, it would embrace this technology for its storytelling. It would have to be about AIs creating a reality that was never actually real in the first place. So, say we wanted to make something similar to the Mandela Catalog. The alternates and intruder could be people deep-faked in real time. On the surface, they look normal, but something about them is just off, or they don't sound quite right. It could be about tricking you into false memories about your own life. An AI serving you up videos of things that you've said and done that you know that you have never said or done before. Your memories being gaslit and your physical body being erased from moments in time that you know you were there for. But slowly, bit by bit, the evidence starts to stack up against you. Pics or it didn't happen, you know? And the pics don't show you for whatever reason. The backrooms are even easier to work with here. Our running theory has been that the world of the backrooms is just one big simulated reality that's become glitched. Something that becomes a lot scarier if we imagine an AI overlord tweaking things and people in real time. Changing a face here, creating a neighborhood out of thin air there. When it detects a problem, it overcorrects its reality, perhaps leading people to glitch out in the first place. Instead of the intentional lack of clarity like with the 80s and 90s era tech, here we're leaning into the hyper reality of all of this. There's too much detail. There's too much precision. So much, in fact, that you begin to doubt yourself, your memories, your own identity. Humans are fallible. The computer's memory, meanwhile, is not. The big themes of this modern analog horror would come down to having your viewers question if what they're seeing is even real, and whether or not we're just seeing a reality through computers, or if we're seeing what's actually in front of our faces. Now that is terrifying. Someone should probably do a series like that someday, huh? But hey, you know what isn't scary? The brand spanking new Google Pixel 7 Pro. Real talk, I adore You're thrown into a series of 6 mystery games with 400 other players. A pot of $44 million is on the line. But more importantly, if you lose, you die. Other channels have covered the tactics to winning the specific games. And honestly, the show itself does a pretty darn good job of showing you creative solutions to its various puzzles. But today, we're gonna help you survive when you're going in blind, just like the contestants. This is how to survive the Squid Game. Mild spoiler warning for some of the games and strategies. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that's brought to you by our totally not made up sponsor for today's episode, USB Power Banks. Are you an off-duty police officer who went out of your way to infiltrate a secret society? Let's get to the strategy. Like I mentioned before, the players don't know what games they're going to be playing until they get to the Death Island. If they're observant, they can piece together clues based on the wall decorations around them, but still, it's not going to give them much time to prepare or practice. And so that's what we're going to assume today, that we've just signed up and have no idea what's in store for us. In this massive game of death, what should our general strategies be? First, we shouldn't assume that just because people are dying, that this is a death game, because it's not. The rules state,
everyone here will participate in 6 different games. Those who win all 6 games will receive a handsome cash prize.
If you survive, you win. And sure, while each death boosts the pot, it's not like a Battle Royale or Hunger Games scenario where there can only be one left standing. Here, there can be more than one winner, and that's important. It means that the survival of one person, or even a group of people, is not directly negative to your personal survival, which then opens up the question, should you be sabotaging your fellow players in order to boost the prize pot and advance yourself? This is a dilemma that actually pops up repeatedly throughout the series. In the second game, Song-woo figures out the game before anyone else does, punching a shape out of a fragile honeycomb candy. Knowing this, he immediately chooses the easiest shape, and then encourages the other players on his team to split up, getting them to take shapes that are much more difficult and much more likely to lead to their elimination. Obviously, there's all kinds of moral and ethical reasons why you shouldn't intentionally try to kill other people, but what Song-woo does here in Game 2 is one of the stupidest moves that we see anyone make across the entire series. The people he chooses to sabotage are people that have agreed to team up with him. The players who, in the event of a fight, are more likely to have his back as opposed to, say, planting a knife between his shoulder blades. Oh wait, that's exactly what we see happen. They come to his rescue the following night when everyone tries killing each other. But teaming up isn't just about keeping people in your personal alliance safe. Keeping more players in the game for longer means more chances for other people to help you survive. Again, take that honeycomb game as the example. In it, players are given a needle to punch out their shape, which is fine for easy shapes like a triangle, but not very effective for the more fragile shapes like the umbrella or star. However, one person in the group, our hero Gian, out of desperation comes up with a completely out-of-the-box strategy, ignoring the needle entirely and licking the candy so the shape can pop out. This, in turn, saves multiple other contestants who copy the strategy, people who otherwise would have been eliminated just like the rest. That's why it's stupid when the players try to kill each other between games 2 and 3, because these are men whose lives were saved by the person that they're now attempting to eliminate. You know what they say, 2 heads are better than 1, so 50 heads should be even better, and 400 heads is even better than that. It's why the internet hive mind is so good at solving puzzles. Everyone brings their own experiences and expertise to the table. So let's just say that you were, I don't know, faced with a challenge that involves jumping across panels of glass, with 50% of those panels being tempered and safe to stand on. Well, it would be really helpful if the group had someone who is a glass expert that could tell the difference between tempered and untempered glass. Oh wait, that's exactly what happens. Except instead of sharing his knowledge, the glass expert hides this fact until the end, after practically all the other players have died. This is stupid, not just from a statistical angle, but also from a strategic one, considering that most of the games are timed. Everyone else, realizing that they're just blindly guessing on a coin flip that could cost them their life, wastes time. Every second that you're hiding your knowledge is a second that the group isn't making progress. As a result, our glassmaker, despite having the knowledge that should have kept him alive through this challenge, ultimately dies because he runs out of time. Had he shared it from the get-go, mostly everyone could have survived what was one of the most disastrous and difficult challenges of the batch. Also, can I just digress here for a minute? This one bothered me. I just didn't really like this challenge. I get that it was a cool visual and interesting concept, but the challenge just didn't work for me. It didn't seem to be based on a playground game like all the others. The game makers cheat by turning off the lights midway through, which directly counteracts their whole everyone has a fair chance motto. The whole putting people into a specific order felt unfair, and then the way they conclude it with a giant explosive finale puts everyone's lives at risk. It was just good spectacle, but also something that felt kind of cheap. Alright, rant over. Of course, there is the elephant in the room. Every player who dies adds more money to the prize pot, but that's the wrong way to think about it. Let's assume that, like we see in the show, there are 6 rounds, and that there will be at least 3 games that require 50% of the players to be eliminated. This would be games like Tug of War and Marbles, where some amount of death is guaranteed. That means that your portion of the prize pot is already going to be sitting at a hefty 800 million won, $668,000 US, even before any additional deaths from the other games. If you're someone like Gian, who has loan sharks to pay off, a family member's surgery to pay for, and an ex-spouse to fight in court, that amount should cover everything while still leaving you with enough to make a down payment on a new house. There's also an economic principle called the law of diminishing utility, which states that if someone is down on their luck, having an extra $80,000 is a huge, massive deal. If you're Gian, that money has a lot of use. But if you're already standing to win over $600,000, another $80K on top is certainly nice, but no longer is the life-changing sum of money that it once was. Once your basic needs are met, as income increases, you gain a correspondingly smaller and smaller increase in your life satisfaction. You get a slightly nicer car, a slightly nicer house. Therefore, it's not something that's worth risking your life over. This is surprisingly a topic that the last episode focuses on, though for spoiler reasons, I'm not going to play the clip. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that any winner of the Squid Games shouldn't have that money, but what I am saying is that there's a tipping point where each additional dollar earned is less and less worth risking your own life to achieve. achieve. And by just playing the game with survival as your first priority, you wind up with plenty of money to change your situation while also minimizing your risk of losing that life so, you can go on and spend it. Obviously, there's gonna be rounds where you're forced to fight for your life and eliminate other players, but if you don't have to kill people, then don't. Never thought that's a sentence I'd have to say, but here we are. But there is one big concern that you have to be aware of. Clause number 3. At any point, the players can vote on whether or not to end the game. If the majority of players want out, that causes the game to end not just for them, but for everyone. In order for you to walk home with your money, you have to complete 6 games. But people will probably vote to escape the games if they're put into a position where they're almost certainly gonna die. So with that in mind, let's go back to the glass bridge. Unless you have outside knowledge of what tempered and untempered glass looks like, the game is generally decided by random coin flips. And by coin flips, I mean the first few people in line coming down with a mild case of death for the good of the group. In the challenge, there are 18 sets of panels. Worst case scenario, you have 18 deaths. The best case scenario is 0 deaths with the person in front correctly guessing every time, but fat chance there. As player number 3 correctly estimates when he's 3 panels in,
probability that I'll get everything right is...
Hey, you got this!
1 in 32,768.
Overall, if you're first in line, you have a 1 in 262,144 chance of survival. The average here is 9 deaths, with the probability distribution curve basically looking like a bell curve, which you can see using any binomial visualization tool. You have one of those handy, right? Using that probability chart, we can see that the first 6 people in line are basically screwed, having less than a 5% chance to survive, while the people going 13th and later have a 95% or better chance to survive. But even if you're trapped in the game with no calculator, it doesn't take a whole lot of brain power to determine that you do not want to be one of the first 9 people to play. So you, as a smart player, hopefully chose not to be one of the first few people in line, but even if you're feeling good about your odds of survival, remember that for you to actually make it across the bridge, you need the game to happen. Let's say that the game has been reduced to 13 players, and you're lucky enough to be 13th in line. That's good news for you. You have 95% odds to survive. However, you probably won't make it across the bridge for the simple reason that there are good odds that the first 7 people in line are gonna nope the heck out of there, going with a majority vote to end the game, meaning that even though you had the ideal position and would have won, you get nothing. Good day, sir! And you see, this is exactly what could have happened in the show. 16 players remaining, knowing that the first 9 were likely to die, they could have voted to end the game right then and there, and because they were in the majority, clause number 3 would have been enacted. Game over. Now let's take the alternate scenario. Let's assume knowledge was shared and everyone's cooperating. At this point, there would have been 2 50% elimination games, Tug of War and Marbles. In the best case scenario, 456 players would have been reduced to 114. By the time you get to the bridge, even if every single one of those first 18 people in line got cold feet, they wouldn't have enough votes to end the game. And instead of most of them being wiped out, we'd expect an average of 9 of those players, or 8% of the 114 player group, to get eliminated. 92% of players surviving to get past this game, pretty darn good odds. In short, your chances of survival increase the more people are around you to take the blows. So now that we've spent a lot of time talking about what not to do, what can you do to increase your odds of surviving in Squid Game? Apart, of course, from playing nice with your fellow competitors. Well, the first one is obvious. Don't panic. Red light, green light is an easy game, and the timer was very generous as long as you stay calm and you use your time wisely. Also, just like with the 3 clauses, make sure that you're paying attention to the game's rules. For instance, we see Song-woo cheat at marbles by misdirecting his partner, but his method for collecting 20 marbles doesn't actually involve breaking any of the rules that are established by the game master.
The player who manages to take all 10 marbles from their partner wins.
Repeatedly throughout the series, we see players presented with an obvious solution, like the needle in the honeycomb game, and they just assume that because this is the default or recommended way to play the game, it must therefore be the only way to play the game. But rarely is that the case. You can lie to your partner and take his marbles. You can lick your candy until the sugar melts. The problem everyone falls into is that they assume certain rules are there when in fact they're not. In the Glass Bridge episode, we see that Gion was able to take a single marble as a keepsake with him, which ended up being relevant in that very game. A second, third, or 20 more marbles could have come in real handy with that one. Also with that Glass Bridge, the rules just state that you have to jump from panel to panel.
For this game, you will guess which one of the next 2 tiles is the tile made of the stronger tempered glass, and only step on those across the 18 pairs of tiles.
But nothing said that you had to land on the middle of each panel. Landing with your feet on the supporting bars holding up the glass is going to reduce the weight on that glass, ultimately helping resist the breakage. Is it breaking the rules? I don't know. Honestly, I don't think so. But here's the thing, you know that you're gonna die if you choose wrong, so why not try pushing the edges of the rules just a little bit when there's nothing else to lose? By taking a moment to think about the actual hard rules of the game and not automatically dismissing unconventional solutions by assuming that anything else isn't allowed, you might actually be able to find the loophole that allows you to survive. Lastly, use your surroundings. Not only are the walls giving you clues, but your clothes, the bed, the springs, and the mattresses, all of it could potentially prove useful. Were you given a glass bottle yesterday as a part of your meal? Instead of breaking it to try and shank your opponents, why not bring it with you to your next game? Tug of war. Throw it onto your opponent's platform to throw them off balance, or put glass under their feet. Maybe cut the rope so neither side loses. Another thing that I want to get off my chest, this is just a terrible idea.
I think that doll senses when you move around.
That person in front of you is going to stop at times that you don't expect or anticipate. If they get shot, that bullet might go through them and pierce you, or their dead body might knock into you. And instead of focusing on the game itself, you're going to be focused on another person as you run down that field, which is not where your attention needs to be. In short, your number one strategy to surviving the Squid Game should be to ignore Sung-woo.
I think it would put us at a disadvantage if we just choose one. You think?
For being the smartest person in the room, all of his ideas are dumb. I guess except for the tug of war game. Anyway, if you happen to meet a well-dressed man in a train station who invites you to throw squares of paper at each other, now you know what to do. And that's to say no. Because unless your desire to win more than $500,000 is greater than your desire to have more than a 12% chance of surviving the next week of your life, it's not gonna be worth it. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And here's a game for you. Press that subscribe button as fast as you can. See how many times you can press it before this video ends. Maybe you'll end up subscribed to this channel, maybe you won't. We'll find out together. It'll give me the weirdest data for unsubbed, resubbed to a video of all time. YouTube Analytics is gonna be so mad at me for this one. We've watched the show, we've seen the strategies, we know the memes. But has anyone actually stopped to ask the question, could a death tournament like Squid Game actually be legal? Sure, there are people dying for cash, which immediately seems illegal, but then again, those contestants signed a contract. They even opted their way back into the game after voting to exit, knowing full well that their lives were on the line. Not only that, but the whole thing is taking place on an island that belongs to, well, we don't know who it belongs to, but is it outside of legal jurisdictions? Can it be? So again, I ask the question, could the Squid Game be legal? Let's just say that the answer isn't as clear-cut as you might expect, and may come up in a big reveal for season 2. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, where today I'm taking a brief Obviously, Squid Game needs no introduction at this point. I mean, the premise of get a bunch of people together on an island and pit them against each other in a series of playground games in order to survive just sells itself. It is the most watched Netflix series of all time. It's like on that Bird Box, it caused a huge surge in demand for honeycomb candy, pink jumpsuits, and white slider shoes, and it's prompting internet creators from all over to make their own versions of the game. Squid Games in Minecraft, Squid Games in Roblox, on TikTok, Squid Games with friends, and before the end of the year, my buddy Mr. Beast is doing his own version with 453 contestants all competing with the 6 games from the show. Now, obviously, that's not gonna be real, but it prompts the question, could it be? In other words, Jimmy and the rest of the team aren't creating real death games, but if some aging, super wealthy bored guy dying of brain cancer wanted to arrange something exactly like this, complete with the death, would there be a legal way of doing it? After all, they signed a contract waiving their legal rights, so does that make the death game legal? What are the limits of contract law? Can you legally consent to a death game where the rules might result in you plunging to your death? Well, believe it or not, but the question of whether you can legally consent to a death game is something that has actually come up in real life. It sounds crazy, right? Like, who's looking into this case law? But it's come up in numerous cases in the US, specifically with games like Russian roulette, which, disclaimer, is a terrible idea, disclaimer, and should never be attempted ever. Flashing warning lights, awful, awful, stupid, stupid, dumb, don't do this. But basically, it's a, game is not the right word. It is a stupid, dumb, stupid thing where a single bullet is loaded into an empty chamber of a gun, it's spun and randomized, people then take turns pulling the trigger until the gun fires. Loser is the one who dies. Now, like I said, some really stupid, dumb people do this, and they actually wind up dying. But in an interesting legal twist, the other individuals involved in that game get convicted for manslaughter, even when the person who died is pulling their own trigger and doing so voluntarily. Participating in, let alone running a death game, is not legal, even if everyone who's involved knows exactly what they're signing up for. Which means two things. First, that players voting themselves back into the Squid Game doesn't make things any more legal. example. You see, in Squid Game's second episode, after learning that losing any individual challenge means death, the participants vote to end the game, only to realize that the real world back home isn't that much better than Murder Island. As a result, many contestants voluntarily choose to come back in for another chance to play. From that point forward, they're back of their own volition, knowing full well the sort of game that it is and the incredible stakes that are on the line. But all of it doesn't matter. The games are going to be illegal regardless. But you know what that decision does change? It suddenly makes every participant guilty. For the first game, it could be argued in a court of law that the players didn't know what they were signing up for. Who would have suspected that they'd be transported off to a remote island in the middle of nowhere and forced to contend with a sniper-powered motion detector? No one. That would have clearly been like their, second or third guess as to what was going on? At that point in the show, they would have all been innocent. But coming back willfully knowing that this was a game where their fellow competitors were gonna die, suddenly they're guilty by association. Their actions are perpetuating the game, just like in the Russian roulette example, and they're indirectly, or sometimes even directly, getting other people killed. And that meets the definition of manslaughter. Even our hero Gian, who actively tries to avoid killing anyone throughout the series, guilty. Were he to alert the authorities about the illegal death games, his winnings would be seized immediately, and he'd likely have to go to court to answer for all his crimes. Over here in the US, manslaughter equates to anything between 3 and 20 years in prison. So over 400 counts of manslaughter for all the failed contestants? That's potentially 8,000 years in prison. Sorry, Gian, you're not gonna need that fancy new hairstyle in the lockup. The US actually has a lot of specific laws around things like games that involve violence and the threat of injury, given our nation's history of illegal pistol dueling as well as other legal but still violent sports like boxing. That said, all of those specific rules generally fall under a few basic legal principles that apply almost universally, and would almost certainly apply to games hosted in South Korea, like we see in the show, or EU member nations, or pretty much any country on Earth. One of those overarching guiding principles is that you can't legally authorize a contract for illegal activities. I mean, nobody's stopping you from printing out a piece of paper and signing your name on it, but the entire point of a contract is to protect all the parties involved. For example, in Ohio, where I grew up, there are hot wings restaurants that have certain items on the menu that require you to sign a waiver before you'll be allowed to order them. If I were to order that menu item and then try to sue the restaurant for damages after I spent the next day on the toilet, they could just point to the contract and say, look, this guy knew what he was getting himself into. It's not our fault that his bowels are currently erupting like Mount Vesuvius. But you see, that agreement wouldn't protect them against any criminal charges that would be held against them, like criminal negligence or reckless endangerment, which are crimes that you go to jail for. For example, even if I signed the waiver saying I consent to whatever you give me to put in my mouth, the restaurant can't knowingly serve me expired food or rat poison or other things that would violate health codes and or actually pose a serious threat to my life and safety, regardless of whatever legalese they put into that contract. Doing stuff like that is just illegal, and no amount of putting it on a piece of paper and getting other people to sign it is gonna make it any more legal. The long and short of it is that no contract is gonna change the fact that illegal things are just still illegal. You can't consent to getting killed for money. As far as I can tell, it's true of every country's legal system. The US, South Korea, anywhere else. But here's the real question that got me thinking. What if the murder games aren't taking place on South Korean soil? What if they're, as we see in the series, being hosted on a private island? As we've stated, this would be illegal in any country, but is there a way to escape national boundaries and host a death game such that those laws don't apply to you? Well, I sat down, did the research, and the question of what laws apply outside of national borders is actually a lot more complicated and also a lot more interesting than I expected. First off, going to your own remote island, even if it is privately owned, isn't going to legally help you. In fact, the term private island is kind of a misnomer. Yeah, you can have an island that's your own private property, but that doesn't automatically make it legal for you to do whatever you want there. I mean, think about it this way. I own a house. That is my private property, but that doesn't mean that I can just start cooking meth down in the basement. My so-called private property is still legally under the jurisdiction of the US government. The same is true for private islands. Every piece of land on Earth has been claimed by some nation. So what if you're not on land? How about international waters, the fabled high seas where supposedly there are no rules because you're beyond the bounds of any nation? Well, first, you gotta get there. Nations not only own their land, but also govern the immediate water around them. The coastal waters waters of each nation are what are known as territorial waters, which, according to a 1982 United Nations convention, extend 12 nautical miles away from the coast. There's also an exclusive economic zone that extends 200 nautical miles, 370 kilometers, or 230 regular miles, because for some reason nautical miles and just miles are different. Apparently that difference makes it easier to measure longitude and latitude. Anyway, beyond those 230 miles away from the shore, then you've reached international waters. And the idea of floating out into international waters to get away with your illegal death game isn't as outlandish as it might first seem. After all, many cruise ships have casinos that only operate when the ship is sailing in international waters. That seems like it should be a case of using the international waters loophole to circumvent the law, but it's not. You see, that's just a common misunderstanding. According to international law, any vessel at sea has to be registered to a country whose flag they then carry. If you fly a South Korean flag, you're governed by South Korean law. If you fly a US flag, you're governed by the United States law. So let's go back to the whole casino example. This isn't a matter of the law not applying to the boat, but rather different laws applying to the boat at different distances from the land. Once a ship crosses into the territorial waters of a country or state where gambling isn't allowed, those casinos on board need to be shut down, because now they're technically playing by that territory's rules. Out in international waters, the casinos are able to reopen because now the boat is following the federal laws of whichever country's flag they fly. But even in those international waters, you can tell that certain rules are still applicable. The casino is still closed to people younger than 21 in accordance with US law. Or if it's flying a flag from a country with more permissive gambling laws like the UK, then the casino could be open to people as young as 18. And by the way, you can't get around this by not flying any flag. In fact, not flying a country's flag makes you even more suspicious. And under international law, any other country's vessel can board your vessel, inspect it, and then arrest you when they see the mountain of corpses that have been piling up over the course of your death game. And even if nobody catches you while you're at sea, the moment that you pull into a port, well, then you can get arrested for any of the crimes that you've committed. Odds are that you're gonna have to pull up to port at some point for, I don't know, things like clean water, more eggs, tempered glass panes, some bleach to clean out the bloodstains from your uniforms. There's a lot of stuff you're gonna need to restock. And if your plan around that is, I'll just stay out at sea and have everything delivered to me, well, anyone who delivers is aiding and abetting you and will then get the handcuffs slapped on them. Come on! Why can't a guy just do one simple thing? One simple thing like giving people the chance to get out of their financial destitution by forcing them to put their lives on the line while rich investors bet on the winners and losers like horses in a race. Ugh! This is why we can't have nice things. Fine, I can't do it on land. I can't do it in a vessel on the sea. What if I create my own frickin' country? After all, me and my poorly acted friends are rich. We're so rich and so bored that we spend our money doing stuff like this, so why not create a new island where we can continue doing stuff like this and not have to worry about some government coming to slap cuffs on us? Artificial islands are already a thing. Numerous countries, including Japan, the Netherlands, India, and Austria, have all created artificial islands. Most of them exist to serve as airports, but one of Japan's artificial islands is home to hotels, a convention center, they even have an IKEA. So what if you go out into international waters and build your own artificial island there? Can I build my own country that disregards all the rules? Create giant games of deadly tug-of-war? Build slides with no height or safety restrictions? Construct railings that have uprights that are more than a foot apart? Woo, spooky and dangerous, but I can do it because it's my country and I can play by whatever rules I want. And you see, now we're getting somewhere. This is actually a topic that's seriously being discussed today. In fact, it's the basis of a movement known as seasteading. This idea has been floated by organizations like the Seasteading Institute, as well as private companies like Blue Seed, which aim to float a ship near Silicon Valley that would allow entrepreneurs from around the globe to gather and work on startup businesses without being at the mercy of the visa system and taxes. A project that I gotta say sounds like the most Silicon Valley thing ever, and also one that's been on hold since 2013 due to, quote, insufficient funding. Come on, you're telling me that no tech billionaire has the money to get this thing off the ground, literally because it's gonna be out in the water? Jeff Bezos, where are you at, bro? I guess he chose space over sea. And you see, there might be a good reason for that. The question of whether you can start your own country and get recognized as a sovereign state is an absurdly complicated topic, with tons of legal implications that remain unanswered on account of nobody actually making a serious effort to do that sort of thing. But luckily, we don't need to get into the nitty-gritty about that today, because we only need to know one basic and simple fact. You can't escape international law by starting your own country. There's such a thing as universal jurisdiction that covers certain universal crimes, like human trafficking, torture, and other human rights violations that you can get arrested for while traveling through international waters. The entire point of this is to designate crimes against humanity as a set of standards that everyone is held to, even if a country might define them as illegal on their land. In the past, these universal jurisdictions have been invoked to hold military leaders responsible for war crimes, or hold government officials accountable when they're responsible for acts of genocide. genocide. So, death game? Yeah, it's not gonna fly. Having your participants sign a contract doesn't work. Buying your own private island doesn't work. Taking to the high seas doesn't work. Even creating your own country doesn't work. But there is still one final option here, and this one sadly does work. And that's being so powerful that the rules don't apply to you. Everything that we've talked about today is the way that things should be, but sadly, as I'm sure we're all aware of in the real world, despite the existence of international law and universal jurisdiction and things like that, plenty of countries still commit human rights violations and get away with it. Even though we'd expect things like universal jurisdiction to allow organizations like the UN to intervene in cases of human abuse, the grim reality is that actually going in and arresting the officials responsible is sometimes impossible without risking wars that would result in many more deaths, especially when nuclear powers are involved. Case in point, North Korea continues to commit numerous human rights abuses, something that the United Nations Human Rights Council has spent years investigating, with a recent report in 2020 based on 100 first-hand accounts. This is the kind of thing that universal jurisdiction provisions under international law should prevent, but don't, because North Korea as a nuclear power is able to get away with it. Now, when it comes to heavy subject matter like this, I'm always going to hesitate to draw comparisons between fictional stories and real life, because I don't want to do it in a way that's going to trivialize the death and suffering of real people, but I do think in this case that it's actually reflective of one of the central themes featured in Squid Game. Regardless of how illegal something might be, the people responsible for torture, death, and absolute brutality can get away with it simply by how powerful they are. By having a character from North Korea who participates in the Squid Game specifically because she wants to help her family escape from the brutal regime, the show is directly drawing attention to that. In fact, given how willing the show has been to address this topic in season 1 by prominently featuring a North Korean defector as one of its central characters, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we were to find out in the inevitable season 2 that the games are actually held on an island under North Korean jurisdiction. Well, there is no legal loophole that I could find that would make the Squid Games legal. The real world has shown us that it doesn't matter how illegal your actions are if you're operating under the authority of certain corrupt regimes. And given their track record, it wouldn't surprise me to see North Korea turning a blind eye to the ultra-wealthy organizing games where people are killed for sport as long as they get to see a cut of that money. Setting the games on an island under North Korean jurisdiction not only logically makes sense from a geographical, plot-based, and world-building standpoint, but it would also fit in with the themes that the show is already exploring in its first season. And that, my friends, is the sad and complicated truth of the Squid Game. While it might seem stupid to ask the question of could something like this be legal, the real-world answer to that actually matters a lot because it's happening around us each and every day. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And just one final reminder that merch is available right below this. Latest reports are in. Looks like they came back with some new footage. Let's take a look. Now it starts to come together. That's it, huh? Well, it's enough. Round up the troops. We've got a lot to discuss. Things just went from bad to worse. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that wants to no-clip into your subscription feed. Today, I once again find myself trapped in the endlessly soggy hallways of the back rooms. The analog horror series produced by Kane Pixels and available right here on YouTube.com for the low price of free. The last time we enrobed ourselves in its putrid yellow wallpaper, we concluded that the world of the back rooms seems to function a lot like a level map in a video game. You know how in a video game there's a set map that you're able to explore, and that there are walls or invisible boundaries that make sure that you stay within the acceptable area of play? Well, the way I see it, that's the real world here in Kane's series, the bounded area that humans are allowed to play in. However, video games also have tons of things that are hidden in spaces outside the boundaries of those levels. Unused ideas, spare assets, cut content. You want to know why FNAF Security Breach's file size was so huge when the thing first came out? Something like 80 gigs of content? Well, it was just piles and piles of cut stuff. Full floors of geometry that weren't accessible in the course of normal gameplay, but hadn't been removed from the game's files. And that, my theorists, are what I expect the backrooms are. The cut content, the spare assets, the AI-generated worlds that didn't quite make the cut for reality. Last time, we proposed that somehow the company Async was able to use electromagnetism to tap into those parts of the map, the ones that exist outside the boundaries of reality, beyond the parts of the world that we're meant to see, giving us the various repetitive corridors of the backrooms backrooms as we know them. Now, since the release of that last theory, Kane has come out with 3 new videos. The first is Pitfalls, where one of Async's researchers descends deeper than ever before in the backrooms, only to discover an entire underground city. The next was Report, where we see the immediate aftermath of that incident and Async sealing the entrances to the backrooms. And finally, there was Presentation, where we see how Async pitched this thing as the solution to an increasingly overpopulated world, but how they ultimately lost their government contracts when a researcher accidentally causes a lockdown of the facility. All 3 of these new videos are full of lore details, but to me, the biggest revelation to come out of these uploads is that the backrooms aren't just responsible for warping physical reality, they're also warping time itself. Attention all you partygoers, I think I've cracked exactly how and why people are no-clipping into this place. But enough talking, friends, it's time to go get lost in these endless hallways of lore. Now, despite the video game concept of no-clipping being a key part of the original creepypasta that this series is based on, Kane has yet to explicitly reference any video game terminology. However, after watching this new slate of videos, I'm more convinced than ever that we're still on the right track. For example, let's take a closer look at Pitfalls. In it, we follow researcher Marvin Lee as he falls to a deeper level of the facility, only to discover a full neighborhood underground. And I do mean full. Streetlights, houses, trees, all of it. Well, all of it except for people. There are no signs of life here. So either an entire empty town fell into the backrooms, or this is yet another example of an unused or incomplete level. And when we do get to enter one of the houses, things are just slightly off inside. There are 6 inverted street signs just hanging out in the middle of an empty room, almost like a level designer intended to put them out on the street, but instead just moved them out of sight into the house. Making things even stranger though, the house has a single hallway leading straight back. It's like the uncanny valley of architecture. It's clearly meant to be a house, but it just doesn't nail it. Almost like it'd been designed not by a human, but rather by an AI. Something that's trying to mimic a human home, but without fully understanding the flow and function of the various rooms and hallways. But of course, it doesn't end there. If you've followed the backrooms at all, you know that Kane likes to hide a bunch of secrets in the descriptions of his videos, and 2 of the new uploads, Report and Presentation, link to secret unlisted uploads. The first of these is titled This. I'm just gonna call it Numbers, because saying a long string of random digits every time is gonna be a pain. This Numbers video seems to be footage from a traffic camera on a highway. Nothing too out of the ordinary, right? But then, about 22 seconds in, we see a car no-clip through the ground. Not only does this tell us that literally anything can wind up in the back rooms, including large vehicles like cars, but I think we might be able to figure out who was actually in that car. Back in the upload Missing Persons, we see posters for multiple people who have disappeared since the opening of the back rooms. One such poster is for Margaret Watson, the only poster of the bunch that describes not only her physical appearance, but also her car. Her car is a 1987 Ford Escort. And wouldn't you know it, but when you compare the footage from Numbers to an 87 Ford Escort, they have the same boxy appearance. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is meant to be footage of Margaret Watson no-clipping into the backrooms on December 2nd, 1989, along with her car. But that's not all that we can get out of the secret upload. The digits in the title of Numbers obviously aren't meant to be random here, but what are they? All our usual suspects are out. Ciphers don't seem to work, it's not a phone number, and it doesn't seem to be long enough for hex code either. Nope, Kane decided to get even more creative with this one. That series of 13 numbers is actually an International Standard Book Number, an ISBN. These are unique numeric codes used to identify books, kinda like a fingerprint for a book, and 978-0415-263-573 is linked to a book written by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, the literary classic, The Yellow Wallpaper. Yellow wallpaper, you say? If you've never had to read this for school, or even if you did have to read it for school and you didn't, this was a landmark piece of feminist literature about a woman slowly going insane after being forced to stay in a room with ugly yellow wallpaper. She begins to see moving shapes and people within the wallpaper, and she believes that the ugly yellow color stains everything that it touches. By the end, the woman has peeled all the wallpaper off the walls trying to help the person that's trapped inside, only for the woman to then believe that she's become that person. Now, there's little direct correlation between the short story and the Backrooms videos, but a lot of its ideas are clearly present here. For example, as we see in Pitfalls, the bacteria monsters can mimic the voices of their victims.
Hey! Can you hear me?
The monster can also infect the corpses after killing them, like we see with a victim named Nicholas Bolton in the video autopsy report. In a way, they're almost replacing their victims. The monsters are trapped in the back rooms, like the people in the wallpaper from our short story. Their next step then should be trying to get out of the wallpaper, out of the back rooms, and out into the real world where they can infect more. Framing this in our simulation theory, it's almost like this is a computer virus infecting reality, corrupting it, just like the ugly yellow color of the wallpaper staining everything that it touches in the short story. Now, while all of that's certainly interesting, and I always love a good excuse to work in a literary reference, it's the second secret video that really starts to break this thing wide open, and it all boils down to The Simpsons. This one is simply called The Simpsons, and it, fittingly enough, features a clip from The Simpsons, specifically the episode Bart Gets Hit by a Car.
I'd like to talk to you about bringing legal action against the fiend who did this to your boy.
Feels super random, right? I'm just sitting here watching a Simpsons episode now. However, the clip glitches out about 35 seconds in, and suddenly we're sitting here watching a Spanish commercial for a cough medication named Dimacol. And while I could certainly stand here and draw parallels between a medicine for cough syrup and a mutated bacteria monster running around, I don't think it's the content of these clips that's important here. Instead, I suspect it's the timeline of their release. You see, Bart Gets Hit by a Car premiered in 1991. This timing makes a lot of sense. Up to this point, practically all the videos of Kane's Backroom series have been dated from the late 80s or early 90s. But the Dimacol commercial really stands out in this context. According to its archive on YouTube, this thing didn't hit airwaves until about 2000. What I suspect is that async opening portals to the back rooms temporarily messes with the flow of time. Here, that Simpsons clip from the early 90s is interrupted by a commercial from the future, only for things to return to normal after async's experiment is done. Does it sound crazy? Yeah, it does, but it shouldn't. Time clearly works differently in the back rooms, and this isn't the only example we have. Here in the Pitfalls video, as Marvin moves further into the hallway in the back of that weird house, the camera glitches just a bit, and if you listen closely, you can hear something playing in the background.
Repeat, Marvin, do you copy?
Did you hear it? It's really hard to make out, but if you listen carefully, it's actually a news broadcast from when Cuba and the United States reopened diplomatic relations. Let's compare.
Will make the trip to the U.S. Do you think that your current president, President Castro, will come visit the United States?
Repeat, Marvin, do you copy?
That specific broadcast, it didn't happen until July of 2015. The date of Pitfalls, meanwhile, is 1990. In this short scene, we're actually hearing news from 25 years in the future. But it doesn't just stop at news broadcasts or commercials airing decades out of their own time. We see the physical interference of time as well. As I mentioned earlier, the video presentation shows us Async losing their government contract with the Department of Energy because of an emergency lockdown. The thing that causes the lockdown? An Async researcher accidentally enters the control center for the back rooms. Not all that big of a deal, right? Wrong. You see, it's the same researcher that saw his team glitch out and disappear all the way back in informational video. At the end of that upload, we see him open the Async control room and set off the red alert. But here's the thing. This guy disappeared on February 29th, 1990. His reappearance and presentation is on May 8th, 1990, over 2 months later. But clearly he hasn't been wandering around for that long. He's somehow been transported into the future. This can even go so far as to explain a discrepancy that I've called out in past videos. In the very first upload of the series, we see a clapperboard that clearly marks the date as July 1990 something. But the date in the description of found footage reads as September 23rd, 1996, a date that's just completely different from what we saw written on that clapperboard. When we first covered the backrooms, I figured this was just an innocent mistake, you know, small error in dates during a point in the series when dates didn't matter all that much. But now it is clearly setting up the idea that time works differently within the back rooms. But that then begs the question, how? Why is time acting crazy, and more importantly, why now? Well, we might actually have an answer for that. You see, one of the secret uploads for the series is an archive file from March 11th, 1990. In it, we see the rooms being flooded, which would obviously explain the soggy floors. But more importantly, this is where we first learn about the concept of null zones. Now, if you don't know what these are, yeah, you probably shouldn't. They haven't been been explained at all, and they've only been referenced once in the main series as a passing comment in Pitfalls.
But what if Miller's right about the null zone?
In the original Creepypasta's lore, there were things called null rooms, but Kane's interpretation of the entire backrooms idea has taken a lot of liberties, and his null zones don't seem to relate all that much to null rooms in any way outside of just sharing the word null. Instead, basically all we have to go off of is this one image. It's a bit difficult to make out due to the quality of the video, but I think it reads, due to the elevation discrepancy between panel 225 and 224, a null KX field is created. It's not much to go off of, but at least it's something. And looking back at Pitfalls, things start to make a bit more sense. Marvin asks about the null zones after entering an area that's at a slightly offset elevation. Look at the difference in heights between the hallway and the neighborhood. And that news broadcast from the future, the camera picks it up only as Marvin crosses the threshold of a single stair in the hallway. Each time we see an elevation discrepancy, he is crossing a null zone. See, the phrase null KX field caught my eye for a lot of reasons. Seemed like a jumping off point that Kane put in so theorists like us could discover something about the world that he's building. So let's break down what the phrase could actually mean bit by bit, starting with null. In physics, a null is a point where two opposing quantities cancel each other out. Basically, when two equal waves meet, there's going to be a point where they perfectly reflect each other, thereby canceling each other out. The channel Electro Boom here on YouTube demonstrates this really well using sound waves.
Right now only the first speaker is on, and I'm gonna stay out of its way and turn the second speaker on. Now I turn the speaker off again. On. Off. On.
So whatever a null KX field is, it's canceling something out, some sort of a wave. And I have a strong suspicion as to what those waves might be. Electromagnetic waves. We see what appear to be electromagnetic tubes making a ball disappear in the video prototype, and we hear talk about magnetic field distortions in other uploads like Third Test. So it seems like a solid hypothesis. Moving on to the KX here, we can assume that the X is a reference to the X-axis. You know, X, Y, and Z axes on a three-dimensional graph? Well, that explains our X, which leaves us with K as some sort of a constant. I dug around for formulas that use the specific KX nomenclature, and while Hooke's law for the potential energy of a spring was certainly a possibility, felt like an odd fit considering the material we're working with here. It seemed far more likely that the KX here was a reference to the numerous formulas for electromagnetic field equations that use KX as a dimensional point. And here's the thing, a lot of our everyday life can be traced back to electromagnetic waves. Light, heat, electricity, radio, X-rays, microwaves, all of them have a place on the electromagnetic spectrum, and objects that use or give off those things also tend to create their own EM waves. Your phone generates EM waves. Your car, EM thanks to its alternator. What's more, every person that we've seen no clip into or experience strangeness in the backrooms has been using technology that uses EM waves. Kane, Marvin, and the researcher from Informational Video were all using electronic cameras to write information onto magnetic tapes. And Margaret Wilson, she was driving her car when she no-clipped through. What if people are no-clipping into the backrooms because they're unlucky enough to be in a spot where the electromagnetic wave from the real world happens to meet one from the back rooms, thereby creating a null zone, canceling each other out, and letting the person slip through. Electromagnetism is also one of the four fundamental forces of nature that make up our world. If you think of it back in the terms of a simulated reality of a video game, it's almost like an integral part of the game engine code that runs our universe, and I think that's literally the case here within the universe of the backrooms. Through their experiments with electromagnetism, Async has glitched their own reality, like a speedrunner that intentionally manipulates the RAM of an old game to tweak the code and teleport to where they shouldn't be. But this has broken the rest of the game, the rest of reality. And now that part of the game engine is glitched. Players are randomly no-clipping into places they shouldn't be or hearing audio from faraway futures as they wander into these null zones. More and more, the world of the backrooms is starting to sound like the world's jankiest MMORPG. And just like with a video game, exploiting a few glitches here and there can really cause the game's stability to collapse, which means it's likely that this is just the beginning. The physical world and time itself will become more and more unstable as new rooms are open and as more people clip in. What started as a high-tech way to expand your garage storage or squeeze in a few extra cubicles will suddenly put the entire world at risk. The lines between the real and the simulated will start to blur to the point that, just like with the woman in the yellow wallpaper, we're all infected. We're all going a little mad. We're all the ones trapped inside of the walls. But hey, if you've ever felt like you were glitching out or that you couldn't trust the reality of your computer screen, you might have just been using an unencrypted internet connection. If you're reading this, then unfortunately what I predicted came to Stand aside, Dream. If you thought Clay dropping the mask was the biggest thing happening in Minecraft news this week, think again. Because today we've got an expose on Steve. Yeah, that Steve. Turns out Steve's the latest in a long line of heartless oppressors, conquering lands, sucking out their resources, and then leaving them to die. How do we know this? Well, have you heard about the newest game, Minecraft Legends? The whole thing is pure propaganda. Whole bunch of lies. So, let me ask again, who's really going mask off now? Huh, Mojang? Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show where we're still trying to bribe Mojang into telling us what's canon.
And if people are asking, is that fact? Did that really happen? We're not saying that that's exactly what happened, but maybe it did. Do you think it did?
What's it gonna take, Mojang? How many emeralds we talking about here? Because whatever it is, I will make it happen. You see, friends, today we're diving into the newest addition to the world of mining and crafting, the yet-to-be-released spin-off title, Minecraft Legends, an action strategy game that, based on the first few trailers, seems to be bursting at the seams with, say it with me now, lore. I mean, just look at this thing. You can see enemy mobs like zombies, skeletons, villagers, and are those baby creepers down there? All of them uniting together to follow a mythical hero leading the charge against an invading force of piglins. And looking at some of those pig people, it looks like they've been hitting the gym recently. What is going on with this game? Well, whatever it is, it seems important. You know those mysterious broken nether portals that you find out in the overworld? Half-filled frames of obsidian surrounded by magma, netherrack, and gold engulfed in flame? Minecraft proper never truly answers why they're there or how they get there, but it seems like the new game is gonna answer all of that. Within the first 40 seconds of the announced trailer, we see nether portals bursting up out of the ground, piglin armies charging through them ready for battle. And again, look at it, netherrack with gold detailing. They are the same thing. It's likely these nether portals got dismantled by the United Overworld Army who broke them up in an effort to prevent more piglin forces from charging on through. So right off the bat, this new game seems to be positioned as a critical linchpin for fleshing out the lore of Minecraft. If new mobs and backstory are one of the things that they're putting into the trailer alone, can you imagine what must be hiding in the game proper? I could spend hours poring over this thing frame by frame to find all its little secrets, except there's one tiny little problem with that. The devs are refusing to tell us whether the game's canon or not. Quote from them: "The events you'll take part in are neither fact nor fiction. They're simply part of a tale that's been passed down from villager to villager," which is exactly the sort of stuff that we see in the opening seconds of the trailer. A villager holding a book and us zooming through the pages into the world of the story. Because let's face it, nothing helps the clarity of storytelling in video games like when a series introduces books of questionable canonicity. Anyway, the way I see it, it's free real estate. And with Minecraft Live coming up next week, I figured now would be the perfect time to look into this game to start theorizing about its canonicity and how its story may be able to fit into the wider Minecraft narrative. Because let me tell you, friendos, I don't buy it. I smell something fishy here. Oh, sure, this legend being passed down amongst the villagers, the narrative the game seems to be selling us on is all about a hero who unites the overworld to save us from pig-themed invaders. But I don't think it's true, or at least I don't think it's entirely true. I suspect that what we're seeing here is actually a warning. A warning from a dying dimension, and it all boils down to one word: greed. In one of the early trailers for Minecraft Legends called Fiery Foes, we're told some of the motivations the piglins have for invading.
The one I like most tells of a peaceful land that did not know cruelty. Until it was attacked by invaders, spreading the scourge of greed.
Huh. Greed. The piglins are attacking because they're greedy? I mean, I guess I can see that. If you throw out gold when encountering a piglin mob, they'll forget they were attacking you and run straight for it, so clearly they are motivated by at least some level of greed, but something just seems off about this explanation. I mean, gold is actually pretty plentiful in the Nether. It's literally all over the place. Sure, the overworld has gold too, but it's much more sparse than in the Nether. It would make much more sense if the piglins were interested in diamonds or iron, resources that you can't naturally find down in the Nether. But nope, they don't really seem to care about those. Sure, you can find diamonds and diamond armor down in the Bastion remnants, but those feel more like things that they've collected with no real understanding of their use or value, considering that they choose to wear gold armor and use gold weapons instead of opting for the much stronger diamond-based items. So the idea that greed was the thing that led the piglins to the overworld just doesn't make a lot of sense given what we know about their society. So if it's not that, then what could possibly be the reason for their invasion? Well, this isn't the first time that we've seen interdimensional invasion within the Minecraft universe. Maybe looking at that other instance, we can get a better idea of what's happening here in Legends. So come with me as we explore Minecraft's dungeon crawler, the very creatively titled Minecraft Dungeons. The main plot of Minecraft Dungeons focuses around the Orb of Dominance, a sentient object that's able to manipulate anyone around it. At the end of the main story, the Orb of Dominance is revealed to be the Heart of Ender, a creature of immense power that looks like you crossed an Enderman with a spider. Of course, we defeat it and send it back to its own dimension, but that's not where the story ends. In the game's DLC, Echoing Void, the player is tasked with collecting 6 Eyes of Ender so that they can travel to the end to finish off the Heart of Ender for good. To do this, the player has to fight against Endersent, these lanky, hammer-armed, incredibly powerful versions of Endermen. But why have we never seen these things before? Are they just a construct for the game? A mob to fill out the roster of a new title? Or is there an actual lore reason they're here and not in Minecraft proper? Well, as I kept playing, I started to see that this was only the beginning. As we're all very familiar with by now, the end in vanilla Minecraft is a fairly desolate wasteland. You've got abandoned cities, a very limited number of mobs, and a singular type of plant, the chorus fruit. But over in the Minecraft Dungeons Echoing Void DLC, the end actually looks very different. You'll find that there are a number of species and subspecies that we've never encountered before in the regular game. In addition to the giant Endersents that I just mentioned, there are also 3 types of Enderlings: Watchlings, Lastlings, and Snarelings. The end also appears to have plant life beyond just chorus fruits, with plenty of grass and trees lining the pathways through the game. This is a huge change from the barren yellow wasteland that we're familiar with in vanilla. But why? What could this possibly mean? Is this just because a different developer worked on the game, or because they were looking for an easy way to expand the franchise? No. And we know this for a fact due to one creature, the Endermites. You see, the loss of animal and plant life that happens between Minecraft Dungeons and main game Minecraft is known as biodiversity loss. Something has caused the dimension to undergo a massive decrease in the number and variety of flora and fauna living there. Now, in the real world, biodiversity loss is generally a marker that the ecosystem is dying due to factors like global warming, natural disasters, or the 2 that I think that apply to the end, invasive species and overexploitation of resources. Let me give you an example of how these sorts of dominoes fall. Back in 1926, the last of Yellowstone National Park's wolf packs were killed off by employees, all as a part of an effort to reduce danger to humans that might be camping there. Good job, humans! Way to punish animals for the problems that we ourselves create. However, this set off a chain reaction of unintended consequences. By removing an apex predator from the ecosystem, suddenly the elk population exploded inside the park, and they began to overgraze. This then damaged the population of trees, which in turn lowered the number of birds that the area could support. It also made it so beavers were unable to properly build their dams, which caused higher levels of soil erosion along the riverbanks. The erosion and overgrazing impacted the plant life near the river that shaded the water, which combined with the lack of beaver dams, raised the water temperature beyond what the local fish could tolerate. The ecosystem was in a death spin. The only thing to stop the downward spiral was a reintroduction of wolves back into the ecosystem, and this is what I suspect happened between Minecraft Dungeons and Minecraft. You see, if you've been watching our Minecraft theories for a while, you'll know that there's evidence to suggest an invasive species did indeed show up in the end. Us, humans, whatever you call the ancestors of Steve. I call them the Ancient Builders. As we've talked about in past theories, it's likely that the Ancient Builders, while on the run from some threat like say the Warden or Wither, built an emergency portal to the end and then wound up getting stuck there. They were, whether intentionally or not, an invasive species to this new land. And since they had no way home, they had to start using local resources to survive. As we see in Dungeons, it's likely that when they first traveled to the end, it was a thriving natural ecosystem. They began to build cities using the local resources, purple wood and purple blocks. There are also a number of new glowing blocks throughout Minecraft Dungeons and cities. And given that most of the fauna that we see here is bioluminescent, it's likely that those were the plants used in creating those lanterns. All of this usage by the invasive species overtaxed the available resources, which in turn left the end to start its slow, painful death spiral. It also didn't help that the builders hunted down the race of ender dragons to near extinction in order to make their elytra. Again, this is something that I went much more in depth into in a past theory, so if you're a bit confused or you want more detail, or you're just like, hey, prove it, MatPat, that video is available for you right there. Anyway, just like the wolf packs in Yellowstone, when you eliminate an apex predator from an ecosystem, there's gonna be some unforeseen consequences, some dominoes that tip over that you didn't see coming. And here, it's the Endermites. You see, in the Minecraft Dungeons Echoing Void DLC, Endermites are everywhere. They are literally crawling around the dimension. But in vanilla Minecraft, yeah, not so much. They only have a 5% chance of spawning when you throw an Ender Pearl. So what happened here? Well, I suspect that by killing the Ender Dragon, the ancient builders killed off the mites' only real predator in the dimension. And even worse, they probably gave them a massive feast. Hundreds of dead Ender Dragon carcasses that are all ready to be munched on, allowing the Endermites to reproduce and multiply at a rapid rate. And when the Ender Dragon carcasses were all gone, well, mites are known to also eat plants, thereby leading the remaining fauna to be devoured by the bugs. But once that was gone, there was just nothing left but a wasteland. The Endermites slowly began to die out just like everything else in the dimension. The only ones that were able to survive were those trapped in Ender Pearls, like the ancient insects that researchers are able to find trapped inside of amber here in the real world. The pearl is thrown and shattered in the game, setting free the ancient bug kept preserved inside. Which brings me back to the thing that started the whole theory in the first place, the piglins in Minecraft Legends. Because while Mojang is claiming that greed is the reason for their invasion, knowing what we know now about the end, we can start to piece together a different picture. Sure, greed might be the impetus for this invasion, but not piglin greed. In the trailer, we see piglins charging through the portal, except they aren't all piglins that we recognize. One of them is a massive, very intimidating looking piglin that seems to be what happens if you give a piglin brute some steroids. This shows us that, just like what happened with the end, the piglins and the nether also used to have itself a greater variety of subspecies. It also appears like the piglins may have been able to bring through a greater variety of hog-like mobs to assist them, which would explain the hoglin stables that can be found in some bastion remnants. But by the time we reach regular Minecraft, piglin society's been reduced to a crumbling ruin. They're a species that hoards the last remnants of their most precious resource. This isn't about greed for gold, it's about resource guarding, a behavior that's able to be seen in dogs when they're insecure over losing access to something that they deem important. This resource insecurity showcased by the piglins and the obvious drop in biodiversity that we see throughout the ecosystem points more towards the same issues that the End faced in Dungeons: resource depletion and ecosystem death. The piglins may look like they're on the attack throughout these Minecraft Legends trailers, but in reality, they're the ones on the ropes. And the reason for that, the ancient builders. I suspect that they were the aggressors here, invading the Nether, taking what was down there, and the only recourse that the piglins had was to go to the overworld to fight back or go extinct. So if this is potentially true, then why doesn't the game just come right out and say it? Well, like the famous saying goes, history is written by the victors. I suspect the Minecraft Legends might be written that way as well. We've just talked about the fact that the Nether appears to also be facing biodiversity loss, fewer piglin and hoglin subspecies, a Nether ecosystem that feels like it's being picked clean. It's the exact same thing that faced the End throughout Dungeons. It was caused by ancient builders coming in and over-farming resources. So, is it that much of a stretch to believe that the same thing is happening right now in the Nether? And immediately you can start to connect the pattern here. The ancient builders arrive in a new dimension, they start farming its natural resources, they do irreparable harm to the ecosystem, and then the ecosystem tries to fight back. First, we saw it with the Heart of Ender in Dungeons, and now we're seeing it with the piglin invasion in Legends. So far, there hasn't been any indication that Legends will have us fighting in the Nether, but I suspect that, at some point down the line in the DLC or something, we'll not only push the piglin army back, but we'll chase them all the way to their homes in the Nether and then finish the war off down there. In turn, we'll leave their bastions in ruins, the crumbling remains of a once great society laid waste by the armies of the overworld. And if that's the case, if we are indeed the reason that the world was decimated, of course we're not going to pass on the true reason to the villagers. The ancient builders would brand themselves as the heroes of this war, the underdogs, the ones that had to unite the overworld in order to fight the inhumane invaders from below the surface. And the villagers, safe in their healthy overworld with its abundant resources, wouldn't be any wiser. They'd just be blissfully ignorant of the truth, believing whatever they were told about the true reason these invaders were coming. It was greed. Sure, the pig-faced creatures wanted our gold. And yeah, it might have been greed, but it wasn't the piglins who were greedy. So, is Minecraft Legends canon? Yes. No. The legend is canon. I have no doubt this story persists among the villager communities, but the story itself of an invading pig army? No, it's fiction. Or at best, it's a half-truth. It hides the reality that resource-hungry overworlds came, saw, and conquered, with zero regard for the species that lived there. Who would have ever suspected that this game, all about building, would have its roots tied to so much destruction? But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching. And hey, if you're interested in some more Minecraft
And one of the most anticipated things in this update is the addition of Netherite. Now, Netherite is essentially a level up from Diamond. The gear is better than Diamond. Everything like that is better than Diamond. And obviously, all the weapons are more powerful than Diamond as well.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that reminds you to never waste your diamonds on hoes. Over the last year, we've talked a lot about Minecraft lore on the channel. From the history of the Enderman, to the Wither, to the Drowned, to the Piglins, to the Illagers. Like I said, there has been a lot of lore that we've been piecing together for this game. But today, I wanted to talk about something a bit different. Something that came as a part of the huge update to the Nether that just happened back in June. You see, we finally got ourselves a brand new ore, Netherite. And that alone would be a pretty big deal. I mean, the last ore actually introduced into the game was Nether Quartz back in 2013, and the last ore that people actually cared about introduced into the game was Emerald back in 2012. Sure, ores over the years have gotten themselves texture upgrades here and there, but nothing new has really shaken up Minecraft's mineral hierarchy for the better part of 7 years. But that's not all that makes Netherite special. Not only is Netherite new, it completely changes the game. To quote from the official Nether update page, discover Netherite, a powerful new material that makes diamond look like cobblestone. Get dunked on, Diamond. There's a new stone in town, and it is but ugly. But it is rare and powerful and can be used to upgrade your diamond-based gear so it's stronger, more durable, and can float in lava, so yay! After 10 years of diamond domination, it being the uncontested champion ore in Minecraft, the cyan blue stone that defined this game in its visual style, the ore that everyone ran around to show off their mining and crafting skills, it's now fallen off the top of the heap. The stone that launched 1,000 cosplay and parody videos is, as the update says, no better than cobblestone. It was a huge shock to the Minecraft community when it was announced, but not to me. You see, I've known for a while that diamond tools aren't really all they're cracked up to be, and that for years the Minecraft community has been overlooking the true best material of the game, one that has been hiding in plain sight since the very beginning. So step aside, Netherite, hand over your crown, Diamond. There's a new old ore that's top of the class that all the real miners and crafters are going to be running around with starting today. Today, we are flipping the ore hierarchy on its head to show you what the leadest of gamers should really be using as they roam around the Minecraft overworld. On its face, it's easy to understand why Diamond's been the reigning champion of the Minecraft world for a decade. Diamonds have this air of being super rare and super valuable. In the game, this is absolutely true. And while it isn't quite so true in real life, it's actually all a bunch of marketing hype and artificially limited supply lines by the Diamond Cartel to boost prices and demands, which is a story for another day, or I guess a different channel. But anyway, at the very least, real-life diamonds are marketed to be super rare and super valuable. But perhaps most importantly for our discussion today, diamonds are the hardest material on Earth. No joke, the word diamond actually originates from a Greek word which means unconquerable, and the scale that's used to measure hardness, the Mohs hardness scale invented by mineralogist Friedrich Mohs, was set up as a 10-point scale based on diamond being the maximum 10 out of 10 hardness. Now, technically speaking, there are some chemical compounds that have been found to be harder than diamond. In 2009, scientists discovered that when materials like wurtzite, boron nitride, and lonsdaleite were exposed to certain laboratory conditions, they actually ran a higher hardness rating than diamond. But, you know, that was only under specific laboratory conditions, meaning the claim that nothing is harder than diamond is still one that absolutely holds up. Besides, who would walk around the Minecraft overworld wearing something called wurtzite boron nitride armor? I probably totally would do that. Anyway, all of this is actually a big part of the reason why diamond jewelry is so sought after these days. The jewelry industry has done a good job of taking the hardness of diamond and using it as their marketing catchphrase, diamonds are forever. And so it's the stone that you should give someone if you truly do love them forever. What is this, tanzanite? Get your crappy tanzanite out of here. So the TLDR here is that diamonds are really hard, and that hardness makes them incredibly useful for stuff like mining. And I'm not just talking about in Minecraft, but in real life where diamond tools are used to cut through hard rock surfaces. The drill tips for massive industrial drills, or heck, even some of your basic drill bits at home, are covered in diamonds. They're also great because drilling through rock creates a ton of friction, and friction creates heat, enough heat to melt or deform a hard metal tip. But a diamond covered tip can deal with that sort of heat just fine because diamond has an extremely high melting point. So if diamonds are good enough for real world miners using industrial equipment, then why am I making a theory poo-pooing them? Surely they must be good enough for an intrepid Minecraft adventurer, right? Well, no. Diamonds are indeed harder than any other substance on Earth, or I suppose in the overworld of Minecraft prior to the introduction of netherite. And their ability to withstand high heat is useful for many applications, but just because diamonds are harder doesn't mean that they're tougher. Is diamond the hardest? Absolutely. Is diamond the toughest? No, not at all. And you see, that's the real issue here. Toughness is a real scientific term defined as a material's ability to resist fracturing when force is applied. And the two are actually inversely related. For an easy demonstration of this, consider two bottles, one made of glass and the other made of plastic. Clearly, the plastic bottle isn't as hard as the glass bottle. If you squeeze, you can probably deform the plastic, and it hurts way less to get hit on the head with a plastic bottle than a glass one. The glass bottle is therefore tougher, right? Well, not so fast. Think about what happens if you drop both these bottles on the floor or throw them against a wall. The plastic bottle will probably bounce around a bit, but mostly be unharmed. The glass bottle, on the other hand, is way more likely to shatter when it's dropped. The glass may be harder, but the plastic is tougher. The harder something is, the more stiff it is, therefore the easier it is to shatter. All this to say, diamond is not unbreakable. Apologies to all you JoJo stans out there. In fact, for as hard as it is, it's actually shockingly easy to break. Just look on YouTube and there are dozens of videos of people shattering diamonds with basic hammers. Hardness comes with a trade-off. Diamonds can take a bit of force before they deform, but when they do deform, everything shatters at once. What this means is that diamonds are great for some things, but a terrible option for others. For instance, in the real world, diamonds are great for cutting, so that might make you think that they'd be ideal for cutting down a tree, and you would be absolutely right if you were using your Minecraft diamonds to coat a saw blade. But as any Minecraft player will tell you, trees aren't something that you saw down, they're something that you chop down. And a lot of the cutting force of a chop comes from the impact, something that your purely diamond axe head won't be taken too kindly to. A typical axe-swinging person will strike a tree with a blow equal to about 80 pounds of force. And given the fact that a swing of less than 5 pounds of force can be enough to shatter a diamond, it's pretty safe to say that when your diamond axe head hits the tree won't be the one doing the breaking. And we know for a fact that diamond is the only thing inside of that axe head because we see the recipe for crafting it right there displayed for us on screen. But okay, what about mining? We talked earlier about diamonds being used on industrial drill bits, helping them cut through the earth, so at the very least, the diamond pickaxe should be a viable tool for that half of the Minecraft equation, except it's not. Because of how easily it shatters, diamond is terrible for smashing things, which is a big problem in the world of Minecraft mining, where you break through rock surfaces by smacking away at them with a pickaxe made of pure diamond. A few poorly placed axe hits and you've shattered your blinged out pick to dust. The reason it works for real world mining operations is because you're not smacking the rocks with the diamond, you're rubbing the rocks against the diamond. It's like really intense, really expensive sandpaper. And of course, the idea of diamond armor is just right out the window. After all, an arrow, which in the real world would travel at a velocity of around 225 feet per second, or 69 meters a second, is gonna have enough kinetic payload to deal damage to your armor. And as I mentioned before, the problem with diamond is that if its structure changes just a little bit, it's gonna break and it's gonna shatter. Again, the problem with diamond is that it can't deform to dent or scratch. Anything with enough force to bend it will break it, including a well-placed skeleton's arrow. So real talk here, diamond tools and armor, never that good to begin with. But at least now we have ourselves netherite, the new strongest material in the game. The fact that creating netherite equipment requires you to first have diamond equipment implies that netherite armor is at least partly diamond. Maybe it's some kind of diamond netherite composite that makes both materials stronger when fused together? Unfortunately, that's probably not the case. While metals can be mixed with other metals to form more powerful alloys, diamond don't play nice with others. Again, it's a problem with its hardness. The things that make diamonds so hard is also what makes them difficult to mix with other materials. Diamonds are chemically unreactive, which is a great thing if you want a wedding ring that you can take into the shower with you, but a terrible thing if you're trying to mix it together with another material to make that diamond less brittle. Which means that the all-powerful netherite armor in Minecraft is just diamond armor with a coating of netherite. That would explain why the color when you upgrade the armor goes from this sparkly diamond to a dull shade of whatever this is supposed to be. Seriously, if this is supposed to be the prestige armor, it should look more blingy. But not only is netherite armor a visual downgrade, it's also just a terrible functional idea. If all you're doing is covering diamond tools with a layer of whatever netherite's supposed to be, well, that means that you're getting none of the benefits of diamond while keeping all of the disadvantages of diamond. Even if the netherite coating on your diamond armor is some kind of wonder material that has all the good properties of a strong metal and bends like good effective armor should, the diamond plate on your chest is still gonna crack if the netherite layer gets bent. And then the sharp diamond that's only good for cutting isn't gonna be facing the enemy, it's gonna be pressed against your body. Not only is diamond armor a bad idea to start with, but taking it and then covering it with a layer of netherite coating is an even worse idea that takes the lame idea of diamond armor and actually makes it potentially more dangerous. If that netherite stuff is so good, just use that to make your armor and tools. Stop messing around with all the brittle diamond stuff. Or maybe the real solution is to go back to basics. The ideal armor, or heck tool for that matter, should be made of a material that's strong and tough. By strong, I mean the scientific term to describe how much stress a material can take before it deforms, and tough, how much they can resist fracturing after they've been cracked. How about gold? The old butter armor. Well, gold does have itself a high toughness. It's what's known as a soft metal, but it has a low strength due to how easily it bends. Nope, as it turns out, our old standby iron does great on both of these scales. It's not too soft like gold, but it also doesn't break easily like diamond. Of all the ores available in the game, iron is gonna be the actual best choice. If you want it even stronger, hop back on that crafting table and add a little bit more carbon to that iron and you get yourself steel. Or at least you would in the real world. And honestly, you should be able to craft steel in Minecraft too, considering coal exists in this game, and coal is just a big old lump of carbon. Not to mention the fact that steel is already shown to exist in this universe in the form of flint and steel. I know a lot of mods make steel an actual ore in the game, but the game itself should have it be accessible, and it would be stronger than literally every other ore currently in the game. I know what the game mechanics say, but my true loyalty has got to be to real science. Maybe one of these days we'll get a patch that makes the crafting system more scientifically accurate, and the most exciting part of the crafting will be deciding whether you want a steel alloy with 3% carbon or 6% carbon.
Honestly, I don't know about at this stage that when he made this video that he knew about Education Edition. I didn't know if he knew about that at that time. That's what I'm like giggling a little bit here.
As for all those diamonds, well, maybe you should be using them on your hose after all. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. And hey, while diamond might not be the best thing to use for chopping down trees, netherite, the uber strong material that makes diamond look like cobblestone. A material so powerful that it's hiding in the depths of the scariest part of Minecraft's world, the nether. It's so rare that it feels like you can only find it in your dreams. Well, it's not like any of us are going to be doing much sleep tonight, but why is it so hard to find? What is netherite, and where does it come from? Trust me, this is no simple origin tale, friends. It takes us from the depths of the nether to the reaches of outer space, and ultimately to the secret origins of Minecraft's long-lost lore. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's doing the hard work of piecing together Minecraft's lore because clearly Mojang ain't gonna do it for us.
We really want people to try to figure these things out by themselves, keeping the sense of mystery.
Well, if the Minecraft lore is supposed to be a mystery, then consider me your persistent detective. So far, we've covered a lot of Minecraft lore on the channel, covering the history of this ancient builder race that constructed the monuments that we see throughout the world, something that kinda got confirmed by Mojang recently.
So, the lowdown is, these cities, they come from an ancient civilization, but... Are you still recording?
We've also talked in the past about the Nether, and why those soul sand valleys are even creepier than they seem. However, across all this discussion of Nether and the wider Minecraft lore, we haven't talked about one of the most important materials that you find down there, netherite. Although netherite is one of Minecraft's newest materials, only coming out in June of 2020, wait, it's only been a year since it was introduced? Wow! Seems like it's been forever. Time is just an illusion, man. Anyway, despite it being so new, from a lore standpoint, netherite is one of the Minecraft Minecraft world's oldest mysteries. Since that update, buried deep within the Nether, you can chance upon ancient debris, emphasis on the word ancient, which you can then smelt to form netherite scraps. For those, combined with 4 golden ingots, gets you a netherite ingot, which you can then use to upgrade your diamond armor into even more powerful gear. All of this then raises the obvious question, what is netherite? Clearly it's supposed to be a fictional substance, but when has that stopped us before? So what in real life is harder than a diamond? Well, nothing. There isn't really anything on Earth that compares. The scale that real-world scientists use to measure hardness, the Mohs hardness scale, was calibrated to be a 1 to 10 to prove that diamonds weren't necessary and keeps it. If nothing in the world is harder than diamond, what then is netherite that makes it harder than diamond? Well, what about something that isn't from this world? In the middle of the Arizona desert, there's a massive meteor crater that's over 1.1 kilometers or 0.7 miles in diameter, and it goes down to a depth of 170 meters or 560 feet. I actually got a chance to visit it myself when Stephanie and I moved across the country last year, and trust me, the numbers do not demonstrate how big this thing is. It is massive. As far as scientists can tell, this crater was formed about 50,000 years ago when an asteroid fell from orbit and struck the Earth. And boy, did it leave a mark. Not only that, but upon striking the Earth, the meteorite actually shattered into tons of little pieces. But little might be a bit of a stretch. Here's me and Ollie standing next to the largest fragment ever found. As you can see, it's not so little. Regardless, these fragments went flying, and so scientists have spent decades hunting them down and excavating these meteorite fragments. In 1967, though, they discovered something that was truly out of this world, lonsdaleite, a substance that is in fact harder than diamond. Despite its outer space origins, lonsdaleite is actually extremely similar to diamond from a chemical perspective. A diamond is just a lump of carbon that's been subjected to a lot of heat and pressure, such that the atoms bond together to form a crystalline cubic lattice structure. Lonsdaleite also starts off as a lump of carbon, but is subjected to even more intense heat and pressure, causing its atoms to bond together differently. Instead of forming a cubic lattice, it forms a hexagonal lattice, which apparently is even stronger than the cubic lattice of diamond. Theoretically, a piece of lonsdaleite with a perfect hexagonal lattice would be up to 58% harder than diamond. The big asterisk here, though, is that the lonsdaleite fragments that we've recovered so far have just a lot of impurities, and as a result, only measure around 7 to 8 on the Mohs hardness scale. But in its pure form, lonsdaleite is basically diamond plus. They're both essentially the same material, carbon, just subjected to different levels of heat and pressure. And the fact that it's so similar to an actual diamond makes it a fascinating parallel to netherite. Because remember, netherite gear isn't just something that you can create from scratch. Instead of putting together a couple of ingots on top of a stick, you need to start from the base of a diamond sword, and then add a netherite ingot. Netherite gear is just an upgraded form of diamond gear. Not only that, but the lonsdaleite recovered from that 50,000-year-old meteor is all in the form of scattered fragments, which I suppose one could describe as ancient debris, just like it is in Minecraft. So what? Am I saying that netherite is the remains of ancient meteorites that fell from space? Well, as much as I'm tempted to make this episode about Minecraft's ancient aliens, the Nether is a closed ecosystem with a ceiling, which means it's completely cut off from outer space, so that seems pretty unlikely. Plus, the truth about lonsdaleite is even though we found it in meteorites, it's not strictly an alien substance. Remember, it started off as regular carbon. Scientists in fact believe that while it was floating in space, the carbon was just simple graphite, no different from the graphite that you can find in your pencil. Well, okay, not exactly the same. The tip of your pencil is only 65% graphite, 30% clay, and 5% wax and other resins, but still basically the same idea. Anyway, thanks to the meteorite's size, it was big enough to survive the heat and pressure of entering our atmosphere, and in turn created the conditions necessary to create lonsdaleite. Now, if only there was somewhere in Minecraft that was super hot and pressurized. Oh wait, there is a reason it's called netherite, after all. Places like the overworld and the end simply don't have the environmental conditions necessary to create this stuff. Not only that, but netherite, in item form, literally floats on lava. Seems like a pretty useful property for any civilization making its home down in the nether. So was netherite made by this ancient race of builders that I keep harping on about? I doubt it. We believe the ancient builders to have come to the nether centuries ago. They built the nether fortresses that we find, storing their loot in their chests. They farmed netherwort to feed their pigs, and they did weird experiments to revive the souls of their fallen comrades. But through it all, nether netherite and ancient debris are nowhere to be found. You never just see it lying around a fortress or used to fortify any defenses. It's not found in any chest. It could be that Mojang just never updated the nether fortresses, but they never have been afraid to change old elements to include new ones. For example, drowned now don't drop gold but copper, which feels like a pretty major change. So it must be a purposeful decision to not include those elements in the nether fortress, meaning that the ancient builders aren't the ones that we're looking for. However, in a surprising twist, Mojang did actually hint at some of the lore implications when the nether update happened back in 2020. Take a look at this, quote, "Piglins mined it all out. Now the only way to obtain it is by salvaging netherite scrap from ancient debris. The piglin can mine blocks. This is not a mechanic that we ever see in the game. Piglins can hunt, they can barter, they can even dance, but we never see them mine, which means this isn't a game mechanic, but lore. Sweet juicy lore. If they're capable of mining, as well as the other things that we just mentioned, what else could they do? How about starting a civilization? Think about it, there isn't just one type of piglin. Much like villagers and illagers, there are a couple of variations of piglins, namely the piglin brute. They hunt in teams, they celebrate together in victory, plus they're able to barter with us for resources. If this isn't a society, well then, I don't know what you're defining a society as. But it doesn't stop there. Piglins are found all over the nether, but there's one very particular place where they're found congregating. Bastion remnants, which if the name doesn't give it away, aren't entirely in one piece. They're remnants of their former selves. Clearly in the lore of the game, piglins have been able to form societies, build civilizations, and defend against intruders. Who then were the intruders? Given the fact that piglins are immediately hostile to you, the player, I would suspect that they're at war against the ancient builders, our ancestors. This would first of all explain the ruined state of the bastions, but would also